On the other hand, I would have to say that in Discourse and the Translator, we were not aiming to review the field of translation studies as it then was. We were aiming to try and give some kind of integrated account from our perspective of the whole thing that was going on.
Would you regard yourself as a theorist of equivalence, or is that a key term for you still?
I think it was in those days, right. But I've certainly moved beyond that, and of course so has Basil, under the influence of everything that's been said and done since then. And indeed, I think there are some lines in Discourse and the Translator where we point out that the term adequacy at the time was being seen as a substitute for equivalence. And so even then we had some doubts about it, but when I look back at the text now, I notice how source text oriented we were in those days, and I don't feel that I'm like that now.
Is dialogue interpreting responsible for a shift in your vision?
Not entirely, because as I'll probably say later, we were very much, both of us were very much involved in teaching dialogue interpreting in those days.
Okay.
So we had a close acquaintance with it.
You mentioned Basil Hatim.
Yes.
We should explain that the first main books were co-written.
They were.
Is it easy to tell which parts are Mason and which parts are
Right.
Hatim?
You're asking me to reveal trade secrets now.
No.
No, but I'm going to tell you.
I think I can tell.
Yes, and other people have said to us that they think they can tell as well. But there's a difference between the two co-authored books. The first one was generated by the two of us with a considerable effort, I have to say at the time, managing to clear one morning a week. It was Friday mornings. And meeting together and simply co-writing. And
on each chapter?
On each chapter, all the way through. In Discourse and the Translator, some chapters were first drafted by me. For example, the chapter on pragmatics was first drafted by me. Chapter on register was first drafted by Basil. But then we went over those drafts together and rewrote them as a joint effort. So I'm sure people can see the more Hatim-influenced things and the more Mason-influenced things. That would be natural enough, but it was an exercise in co-writing from start to finish. Translator as communicator was quite different because Basil and I were not in the same location at the time that was written. He had a sabbatical year and he was in Jordan, and I had a sabbatical term, a bit more than a term, 2 terms actually, mostly two terms, which I spent in Barcelona. And Translator as Communicator came out of articles that he had published previously and that I had published previously, that we didn't just put together and edit. We rewrote them all from scratch, but each of us was responsible for our own chapters. So that was considered totally separate writing.
Is it possible to say that the more descriptive passages are Mason and the more evaluative are Hatim, or is that wrong?
I wouldn't have perceived it that way at the time, but if you're referring to the 1997 book, perhaps there is a tendency like that. Yes. Yeah.
Would you call yourself a linguist working on translation or a translation scholar?
I'd call myself both.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm not sitting on the fence there. The point is that, I've been working in translator training and as a translator and occasionally as an interpreter for the last 35 years. And, that is the stuff of my business, all right? At the same time, I came into translation studies via linguistics, and I have always found, and I still find, the methodological tools of linguistics widely conceived, not narrowly conceived. That's important. I still find those the most useful and practical for my terms.
Your work now is more pragmatics than text linguistics, as I understand.
Yes, indeed, although, if you look at Beaugrand and Dressler as the first major statement in English on text linguistics, you will find that pragmatics features there quite prominently. So I wouldn't make a rigid distinction, but it is true that text linguistics now feels a little bit dated in its concentration on the text as an entity in itself.
How about the distinction between text linguistics and discourse analysis?
This is fraught. This is fraught because people have used the terms interchangeably, and, for example, using discourse analysis to talk about speech and text analysis to talk about writing, which is not helpful at all. Yes. If anything, I would say that discourse analysis is having a longer life, and with recent developments, has first of all become very socially conscious with Fairclough's work on critical discourse analysis, but now with critiques of that approach from people like Michael Stubbs and Henry Woodowson and others, we are bringing pragmatics much more to the fore in discourse analysis.
Well, where do you stand in that debate?
Right.
Discourse analysis.
My heart is with critical discourse analysts, right? And I would like those people to be able to demonstrate the things that they are trying to demonstrate, but there are huge methodological problems which have to do with the fact